Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ask Mary Adams, and I'm so excited to have my guest today, Paul Goldman. He is an author, a speaker, and a global teacher, and I'm so delighted to share his message today. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mary. I remember our meeting, it's been many years ago, 7 years ago probably, which is a good number.
Wow, Isn't that amazing how we've been co-creating together all of this time, and it blows my mind that how many people have we touched together.
Oh my gosh, and 50,000 at least, I'll say this, because you mentored me on Twitter and Facebook, and that's my following is over 50,000 between the two.
Wow.
So I'd be wealthy if they each would buy a book. But hey, I didn't say that'll happen, right?
Ah, that's great. So, Paul, tell everybody about who you are and what you do.
Man, I started writing poetry when I was a kid. In fact, I just wrote a poem this morning. We're not going to go into that one, called Poetry Like Fire. And being dangerous, transformative is what that poem was about this morning. So early on, my poetry was the poetry of teenage angst, like hate, death, and war. Why is it no more I'm dead? Okay, that was 13 years old, kind of fatalistic angst perspective. It shifted even more to where there was a spiritual thread in my poetry throughout the writing. And into adulthood, it was still sardonic and kind of fixing society. And it shifted a good 7, 8 years ago to be entirely spiritual. And we'll talk a little more about how that's even shifted more and more, and how I literally feel as if the beloved is channeling her words through me to awaken the planet, which, how awesome is that?
Wow, that sounds like a mission.
Yeah, it is a mission for sure.
What got you started on that mission?
There were several things. You know, the seeds are planted in us, and when those seeds are planted, whether they're the poet without words, whether they're being nurtured or not, they're there. And a woman who has departed the earth, Imogene, was a spiritual mentor of mine I met when I was 17. She turned me on to a book called There Is a River by Thomas Segru about the life and times of Edgar Cayce. So that set me on the path, and my spiritual exploration continued, and really in 2009 I was attending a spiritual awakenings class, and it was ostensibly to deal with some other things. Yet the person leading the class was channeling a guy named Bill that she knew when he was alive, if that's not too far out. And she had us try automatic writing with our non-dominant hand. In my case, it was my left hand. So shut your eyes and start writing. And I played around with this for a while. And soon I was writing poems at my computer with my eyes shut. My wife, Dawn, would go, "What are you doing?" And, you know, it was pretty amazing. So it began to feel as if the floodgates, really to Rumi himself, had opened up. And that was one of the first major shifts, and we can talk a little bit later after I share a particular piece I think it's important to touch on right now with what's going on. But that's kind of what jump-started this path.
Wow. It's always amazing to me as I talk to different people about what was the thing, what got you started. And for everybody, it's a little different.
Yeah.
And it's always fascinating to see where that seed of thought is planted and what that blooms into, because it's not always where you think it's going to be. And everybody's like, well, how did you know you had a spiritual path? How did you know you had a mission? And it wasn't always that there was some big neon sign that was telling me which direction to go. I didn't know I was going to end up here, but it was trusting that every step in that direction was leading me to what I came here to do.
Exactly. And the biggest piece for me is, and I may write that book, but I think the title's already been stolen. Basically, and it's a thing a lot of people know about, but it's been a lesson, a life lesson of learning repeatedly how to move out of my own way, how to get out of my own way. The more that I'm out of my own way, then the more I'm an open, receptive channel to everything.
Wow, that's such a huge key point, because what we find so often is that our stumbling blocks, our lack of belief in ourselves, or that we have anything important to share. I hear that so often from people who have incredible stories and incredible information and education to share. And they go, well, no, you know, I'm just Joe Blow over here. I have nothing to offer. I have nothing to give to the world. And it's so sad to me. It's so sad to me, because if each one of us were to step into our mission, if each one of us were to follow that passion, how would we change this world?
It would shift entirely. I had a chance to step out. I mean, I love to talk anyway, and I do my performance and I do my book signings, and that's really cool. And I had a chance to do something called a Live a Little Symposium. It was like a mini TED Talk that was held in our area. And the promise was going to be that they would get a video of that, and they didn't. So I had this wonderful talk that's not on video, but I had a chance to speak extemporaneously for 20 minutes about my journey and about that idea of getting out of my own way. And really my vision for that and from that is, as you say, I'm not comfortable being on the sidelines any longer. I envision myself presenting what I have to say to tens of thousands of people in an auditorium.
Absolutely. Well, and as we know, you and I have been part of the power of co-creation for so many years now, the power of sharing information and wisdom and working together to get that out. And it's time for all of us to be open and speak from our hearts and speak from our truth and speak from our authenticity about what we want in our environment and what we want in this world and what we want from each other, because we are in confusing times. I have to tell you that it is very difficult for me what is happening on this planet. And it takes a lot of grounding and a lot of meditation and a lot of belief that we can overcome this. I still believe we can overcome this. But this is what truly is going to change the world, is speaking up.
Yeah. I kind of wrote a piece the other day about how I felt after the latest police shootings and then the latest murders of police, and that I just felt uncomfortably numb. I mean, this violence in the world is becoming so commonplace. It has been. And so I sit with it, and then I saw a quote about compassion from Thich Nhat Hanh, and I had to write this piece. And you know, if you'd like, I can share that, and maybe we can talk a little more about that.
Yeah, I would love
and if I cry, it moves me. Maybe it'll move somebody else. So the quote to begin it from Thich Nhat Hanh is, "Those who are without compassion cannot see what is seen with the eyes of compassion." It's called Judge, Jury, and Executioner Come Angels. To the extent that I am unwilling to examine with a fine-tooth comb my own demons is a measure of whether I can suspend judgment that colors everyone like me as different, as suspect, as dangerous. We, you and I, must set aside our disbelief and recognize the world teeters on the brink while we wrongfully tell ourselves that it cannot get any worse. Well, worse has arrived, though this is not the moment we've been so long waiting for. The time has come for us to lay down in action and to raise up the flags of peace, of tolerance, and mutual cooperation, to do whatever it takes. We can no longer rely only on angels in the sky who continue to observe. It is up to us to lay bare all our wounds, to leap into the deep waters of healing, for this is where we finally see the folly of our own illusions of difference that have far too long fed our fears and justified our separation one from another. Freed from the wellspring of all hate, our own self-hatred, all hearts open to the vast field of love that has always been available, as we return to the natural order of being human beings, embracing, loving, and compassionately cooperating so that all peoples inhabiting earth have a new peaceful, plentiful coexistence.
Paul, and so it is.
Yeah. That's a big vision.
It's so moving. I think that you have so eloquently said what I think so many of us feel.
Yeah.
What so many of us desire, what so many of us are so afraid of,
Yeah.
you know? After you wrote that poem, what message did that give to you? How did that move you?
It's almost beyond words. I mean, it just moves me emotionally. So, you know, we talked too, so we'll backstep a second to answer it in the present and then move somewhere. So I had open heart surgery 2.5 years ago. So I had a heart opening before that, probably 15 years ago, at a men's retreat called the New Warrior Training Adventure, where my heart first opened. And before then, I was not a man who, like many men, who was in touch with my emotions. And I began to become more emotional and in touch with my feelings and able to talk about and describe them. Okay, I jumped back there to January 14, 2014, had open heart surgery, single bypass, a heart valve replacement, and the floodgates are open. I cry, I laugh, whatever. I mean, I am in moving waters every moment. That's a profound realization. And I'm open to that. I'm open to whatever that brings. And as tough as that poem is, and the harsh reality of that poem, there's hope in the poem. That at our core as human beings, we're the same. We want the same thing. We want to love ourselves and each other. And to do that, my belief is we have to lay down the illusions. You're no different than I am. There is no color. There is no ethnicity. There is no religion. Where did that come from? That's made up stuff. I have a stronger term for it, but I'll say stuff. I mean, that's made up. We're the same one. That's the message of this poetry that's come stronger through the last 7 years. We're the same one, breathing the same breath. Okay.
Wow. It's so profound and deep, and I feel like there are so many possibilities, Paul. That's one thing that, you know, people say to me, oh, you know, you're just this woo-woo hippie dreamer. It's never going to happen. You're unrealistic. You're out of your mind to think that this can change. It is what it is. Prepare. It's going to get worse. But the truth is that I inherently know, that all beings on this planet want to be free. They want to be free from suffering. They want to be free from bondage. They want to be free from being used and abused and unloved and unheard and unappreciated. That's really what we all want. And this anger and this frustration and these acting out, it's about the hurt inside of that person. It's about what has not been healed. And we need to heal not only as individuals, but we need to heal as societies. We need to heal as families. We need to heal as a planet and know that we have choice. You know, Paul, I even after all these years and all this technology and all of these incredible minds, it blows my mind that we haven't quite figured out how to get along.
Yeah. There's so many barriers put in place for people to see. And that's why, I mean, realistically, I had my hair cut for a while and was in the corporate world before surgery. And, but, you know, I'm just an old hippie. And back then we were going to change the world, and we were going to change it by any means necessary. I vacillated between peaceful means and revolution. And I guess now it's a spiritual revolution. And that's why a lot of my writing talks about, I've got a background in experience, education, and psychology. So, I mean, that's why I know that journey and my own journey. Until I love myself, I can't see who you are. I can't. That's why that talked about that being the number one thing. It moves me, yes, like I say. We'll call this the crying interview, part 1. But that's what I do. I read my poetry and I cry. And it's just because of the message that it's given and because of the potential that's there, because of what I can see. And I can see a planet of people loving each other. Now, I don't know if that's in my lifetime. be honest
Yeah,
with
but
you, I
you
don't
know
know.
what I see, Paul, is I see that there are millions and millions of people around the world that are talking the same talk, that are having the same conversation, that are ready for that shift.
Yeah.
And as you say, you know, and what I'm seeing and what I've seen in the last 8 years of being on this scene is there is a self-love revolution that's happening. There's an awakening. There are people that are realizing that the false ideas and the false belief systems that they grew up in or learned about were not true, and that it didn't make them happy. And having the new car and the nice house and the 2 kids and the cute husband, it didn't do it. It had nothing to do with self-love.
Right.
And as we come into this time where that is becoming the norm, I feel like it's going to shift. I feel like, but you know, and here's an interesting question for you, because you are so well versed in this. With the self-love, how does that change the environment? How would you explain that to people?
Oh my gosh. If I'm loving you and each person, I mean, I'm still a work in progress trying to suspend judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But I drive for a company which will remain a writer's service, which will remain nameless. So, and the biggest thrill I have is that I have a diversity of people show up in my car. Okay. And I get to talk to them, and I choose to talk to them about diversity. And I bring up the subject of oneness, and of my not seeing diversity. And I may have a man from Pakistan or India or Iran that I'm talking to, right? Or, you know, Palestine or an Israeli or anybody. And I share the same conversation. And I find out that we have the same similar beliefs, that at depth, human beings are loved. And the means for that, if I'm truly about loving myself, then I'm putting down damage. I'm not damaging myself. I'm trying in everything I do to do no harm, you know, to do no harm, and to treat everybody else fairly and with the same love that I want to be treated. I mean, I'm quoting biblical practically here. I mean, all we have to do is love one another. Okay? I mean, how are we going to receive any other information than what's already been here?
Right.
If we start being love and seeing love, then the rest of that is not real.
Yeah.
And by letting go of the unreal, we step into the reality of love. So in the final analysis, I have more hope than I think I have a lot of the time. I mean, because really, there is evidence. And I mean, the more horrible things get, the more atrocities we see, the more violent acting out that we see, the more we see humans come together. Go, wait a minute, we've got to do something different. I mean, every time there's something, you hear about people coming together.
Well, and I would say also that part of that coming together is continuing to be in community regardless of fear, and not because we don't want to separate from each other out of fear. We don't want to separate our lives from because we're afraid to go somewhere, we're afraid to go do something because something might happen.
Right.
And what really needs to happen for me, from my perspective, is coming back together as communities. That's my biggest thing, is community. So community online, community in different areas, and joining together to bring in that new paradigm, doing things together to uplift and help other people. And with that, your self-love also changes, because it's not just about you anymore. It's real easy to sit at home, you know, watching the news and judging from that place and coming from that place. But if you really want to be the change, get out in your community. Go support someone who's in need. Go do something locally. It doesn't have to be a global thing. And that in itself changes everything.
And I think there has to be dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's difficult to get going, but there has to be dialogue between all people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm involved in a few organizations that are trying to do that. I mean, I've got a group within the Mankind Project that is ostensibly a group of middle-aged white guys trying to look at racism before we even invite people of color in. to own that as white males we have unearned privilege. And who's talking about that? I mean, you see it talked about here and there, but not really out loud.
Yeah.
And to recognize that we can't be silent at all. It is about community, and it's also, that poem talks about action. And I think that comes about in a whole lot of ways, but that poem talked about raising the flags of peace and tolerance. I mean, of being out there, of being an advocate for peace and for love. And that's an old message. So
how would someone in your opinion do that today? How could they be part of that change today?
I might be the dangerous poet here. Because if we get people in the streets, then that's where things can happen.
Yeah.
You know, that's where things can happen. I don't know. I think it has to happen in a big way online. We just have to take over the airwaves, if you will, and get this message out there. You know?
Right.
You know, you can have the people. I think it's time for people just to be having, heaven forbid, I don't know, you put me on the spot. I think it's time for a peaceful revolution. There you go.
Well, I agree, and and also being in integrity with yourself. If you want peace, give peace out. If you want love, give love out. If you want to have understanding, you must be understanding. If you do not want to be judged, do not judge others. And look at the areas that need to be cleaned up. Look at the places where you are judging, where you are not loving, where you are blocked from understanding. And it can be very scary to take that first step and reach your hand out and say, I don't understand. Help me understand. Or, I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to be at war. So I'm going to back off, or I'm going to forgive.
And I think that's right, Mary. I mean, it begins in the place of my own understanding, right? So again, we're back to the self. It begins in creating a sacred vessel. If I'm a sacred vessel in the world, then everywhere I move, I'm creating sacredness. And that even seems like that's a native tradition, you know, from the inhabitants of the planet originally. I mean, you know, and so a lot of these ideas are not, they're handed down through the years. And to the extent that I can become sacred, the world will become sacred.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about holding space. What does that mean? You know, maybe we are, at the same time I say this, I can see a fear arise in me of people wanting to not allow that. I mean, I could see people just gathering, and it would look like a protest, gathering to create sacred spaces, first in community, and then in larger and larger and larger groups. Until you've got, I mean, I've seen things like this in Europe. I mean, you've got, you know, millions of people that have gathered in the streets of Paris, I mean, for things. So, and it's nonviolent. The question would be, how can that happen, and how can it be nonviolent? And the answer may be because it's being created in a sacred way. Yeah.
Well, and I would say there's a lot of good models of that out there. And it's where you put your attention. Where are you putting? So when you're on Facebook, where are you putting your attention? Are you putting it into peaceful, positive, you know, creating a new paradigm, or are you tapping into the old paradigm? And of course, you know, I hear from people, well, I must watch the news. I have to stay informed. Stay informed. Great. But be a part of the change. Yeah. Don't just sit still and take what's happening and say, well, you know, okay, there's nothing I can do. No, together there's a lot that we can do. And I'm grateful to know that. I'm grateful to understand that.
And what I do is, as a humble poet, I keep allowing the flow of words to come. And I'm a serial poster of my poetry. It's a nice alliteration.
Right.
That's a good poet's word. I have another poem I think that fits our conversation. And it's called In the Howl of Wind. In tones sharp and yearning, I hear the wind's cry, warning for all to heed. There are storms a brewing. Change is coming in strong. Be ready. The time is now. Ask only, am I in the moment? Wait. The answer will surely come. Be assured, we've been so long awaiting your arrival. For each one of us carries within our DNA the very solution to solve the societal crisis enveloping us. Listen. Listen to the howl of wind, yearning for our deep awakening.
Thank you, Paul. What a beautiful way to end our time together. And you'll have to come back on the show because you and I have so many things that we have to share. So Paul will definitely be back. Paul, tell everybody how they can reach you, your website.
Okay, so on Twitter Poet, on Twitter, my handle is Spirit Poet with a capital S and a capital P. It's all one word. And on Facebook, it's Wild Joy, the Ecstatic Poetry of Paul Goldman. And my website is ecstaticpoet.com. There you are.
Great. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. We love connecting with you. And make sure to keep sending in your questions for the Ask Mary Adams show. And we will continue to have special guests to answer those questions for you. And you can submit those at www.askmaryadams.com. And join me on Facebook at Ask Mary Adams. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Namaste.
Namaste.